Start recording. Right then. Bro, everything went over last Monday. So remember that starting off all the basic stuff, black and white maps, best place to start off with. Get the shape of the thing you do. If you're just doing something that is transparency based, just get the shape of what you're going to do down. Don't worry about any of the details first. So like this leaf, for instance, down here, it's just super basic. I'm just, well, actually 10 times, but okay. Ignore all the question maps. It's just so yeah, doing that first, because then we get the idea, we can start building the scenes, we can start building plants and all that kind of jazz if we just had the black and white maps, because we've got the shape, and the shape's all that matters. We can start like tearing them apart and adding edges in to bend them around and make them a bit more visually interesting, make little clusters. Because one great thing about this, I was saying this last Monday as well, we have 4 grass variations, but this is one grass variation I've got here. But there's like 7 different variations of that variation. It's very, very quickly. It's very, very quick to make loads of variations of a single variation. And I'm not nailed down to the colour here as well, or even the final design. Because I was working to that grid, I know that these UVs that I've been cutting out are specifically for these zones, these sections of the grid. So later on I can go back into Photoshop and make these look better, or even change the design completely. But because the position of the UV is in the position of this grass section here, I don't have to re-UV anything. Or if I stick to the same grid, I can make another 7 variations of another grass, because all the UVs are still in the same positions. Do you get what I mean? Using that grid, I don't have to do anything else besides just spend a bit of time in Photoshop. Now, if I was changing the variation completely and making some like a tall stuff like this, yeah, I'd have to start from scratch with a new texture sheet and all that kind of stuff. But super, super basic. Starting off with those black and white maps. And even colours and stuff like that, it's the same kind of thing as going back in there and refining these. I could go through and have a certain colour palette for all of these, and then my art director could go up and go, well, actually we've taken a different direction. We're not going purpley blues anymore, we're going greeny yellows. Like, right, okay. So then all I have to do is jump into Photoshop, make some adjustments to the colour layer, clarify them, and then that becomes the new set. That just updates everything, because these are all pulling from the same material. They're not changing the UV position. Easy stuff. Talking about those other grass variations, so something a bit more 3D, more kind of like tufty and dynamic. Where we've got these. They just started off with a cone. That's made a basic shape, made it tall, give it some subdivision going down the length of it. Unfolded that super basically. That was just a planar projection from the x-axis. Cut across the spine and unfolded it. And I had that. That's super awesome. Again, with that, what I could do with the texture applied to it, or I'll do one of these, there you go. I've got 5 different colour variations there of this one variation of grass. So I don't know if it was the other class or this class, but someone said, can you just change the colour and call it a different variation? No. When we talk about variation, we're talking about the whole shape and look of the grass itself, all the plants. But super, super easy to make more variation with a single variation. Like I said, we can start building up little ideas from there. And we want to make it look chaotic as well. Especially if you're going for something that's a little more wild. There's no refinement. There's not been like planted in rows or anything. These kind of things are vying for position to get the most sun, so they want to be nice and chaotic. So then from all that, we then move on to plants and trees. So I'm going to start off with plants first, because they're fairly easy. It's the same kind of idea for a lot of it. These are 4 elements that I can make so many different plants with. Because what is a basic plant? If we think of like a super, super, super simple plant idea, it's just a stem. It's a stem. There's a flower head of some variety, and then maybe some leaves on the actual plant stem itself. Simple, simple. Then I've got here, I've got this one on the right, is just a simple leaf. Well, it's going to be just a simple leaf that I can position around the stem itself. Maybe cluster 2 up a little bit. Something like that. I've got this, which is a super basic flower head. So if I'm going, I can take this whole setup and even scale them up to make them big, or scale them down to make them small. If I'm going for the smaller one, I could use this just this little plane with an X in the middle, push down a little bit. So like a very, very, very simple, almost like a buttercup style flower. Basic shapes. If I'm thinking quite cleverly with my alphas as well, what I could do is take this and have like different tiers of petals. Talking about like tier 1, I have like tier 2, maybe rotate a little bit. I can have like tier 3, maybe rotate that a little bit and maybe bring it in a little bit. Because it doesn't look like anything at the minute, but when we get alphas on there, it's going to explode. 4-sided, it don't even need to be 4, it could be 3 sometimes. Just a 4-sided pole. I've smoothed the normals so that if we're rotating around it, or soften the normals, sorry, not smoothed. As we're rotating around it, we're not seeing those hard edges that we'd usually see. Right there, we're getting that hard shadow line. Nice and soft. No need to use a 20-sided cylinder. It's a 4-sided cube. And I got this, which I'm kind of ripping off that one version I showed us on Monday, where we had that solid piece in the middle, which is a little, whatever it's called in the middle of the flower, and then the outsides are raising up and lowering down, almost make like gravity. And I can take this and I can make multiple different variations of this. Make it a bit flatter, make it very intense, make it bigger, make it smaller. And none of these have been UV'd yet as well. And I've not really got a particular idea for the flower, except for just a few things I've done just this morning. This is a rough idea of what I want to do for the big flower. So I've got the main petal, just an alpha. I've got a couple of different leaves. I was unsure about which one I wanted to use. Probably going to end up with this one. This one's like a tree leaf more. This is the middle of the flower. And then I've got the stem, and I think they're called stamen. Like in the middle of the flower head, you might have little kind of like things sticking up. So that's why this is white. Because again, this is just my alpha map. All this white section is going to be the stem, the stamen. That is going to be where I have my round thing in the middle. I've got 2 leaves and I've got my main petal. Obviously my main petal's a bit bigger, because I want that to be nice and sharp. So I can just throw that in. So you don't, like, we made a plane and then basically cut out all our grasses on Monday. That's very, very easy to do. Doing this way, where we're not actually going, we're getting rough ideas of geometry and we're laying out some ideas of shapes in the texture. Even this is going to be fairly easy to actually UV, because we could just start off with a plane for some of them. But if I'm not going to do that, I'll just save that out. Control Shift Alt W. It's a bit of a ninja claw thing, but that's the shortcut for getting the new save from Photoshop. The annoying one. So I'm going to save that as a JPEG. Save it as good. Send that out to here. Let's call that file 1 alpha. It's really important that we do these suffixing. Or make sure we know what's an alpha, what's a color, what's a roughness, because there's going to be a load of different textures in this project. And if we're just looking at just a sea of flower 1s, flower 2s, flower 3s, we don't know which one's which or what it kind of represents, what's a job for, it's going to be well hard. Especially if you're going to be working in a studio or you're working with someone overseas. They don't necessarily know what these maps mean, so you need to be able to send something to someone and then be able to go, okay, cool, I know what that is. So always make sure you suffix it with roughness, color, alpha, whatever. So yeah, so send that out. I'm going to apply a new material to all of this, because this is what's going to be pulled from. So distance, throw a Lambert on there. Make sure I clear my history. One. And then I'm just going to throw that transparency map on. So clicking the little checkerboard on transparency, clicking file because I've made a file, then clicking image name, and then navigate. Oh, it sends me no source image. I don't want that. I want images, and I want my flower one alpha. Cool. So as you can see, it's all broken. Oh no. But this is really simple to unwrap, and if you can even call it unwrapping or UVing. Yep, turn that on. Because all I've got to do now is just grab whatever UVs it's given me here, and then rotate and moves into place. So I'm using my texture there to get it right. There we go. And what you can also do, if you can cheat a little bit. I know I was going on about making sure our UVs are really, really clean, but you can stretch and squash some of these UVs. And I give this one a little bit of a dip in the middle, give it a bit of gravity. When I'm laying these out as well, I'm still working to some sort of like grid so that it's easy for me to lay in these UVs. Well, you're not a petal, you're like a basic flower, so I'm going to put something on you in a bit. Let's grab you. So this is my stem. Obviously it's a bit wrong. Not quite right. So I'm just going to automatically project it. Oh, make sure I clear the history. Or freeze transformation, sorry. Because this has still got like translate, rotate, scale data on it from when I first made it. So that means that the automatic unwrap isn't going to come through. I mean, I've got a long, thin stem, and then I'm getting like really short, fat sections here. Not right. So always remember to freeze transformations before you do this, because then when you do it, it's nice. There you go. I'll sew these together. I'm not really bothered about where the seam's going to be. Can be a little. Again, I don't really like saying it too much, but you can be a bit lazy sometimes with organics, because with simple organics like this, because this is never going to be like a presentation piece or a thing that someone's going to go, ooh, look at that. It's stuff to fill the environment. You'd have to be very, very careful when you're doing like big trees, or when you're doing like a key feature or a big plant or something like that. That's when you've got to have nice clean UVs. But for this, I'm particularly that bothered. And I'll put this over here, because in the texture I'm just going to have like a big old green section there. Cool. Now if we just drop that back for a sec, I can do a quick old bit of, let's do some dressing. So I'm getting that transparency BS work happening. I've just got to work around it. Okay, cool. That's alright to me. Now I've got that petal in that text sheet, so I want to use that, but I've not really got anything here that'll be useful for it. So I've got to make that myself, and I want to make something that looks like this. So, what's actually happening here? We've got, again, these tiers of petals going up from the very bottom, going up and up and up and up, and it looks to be quite dense in the middle. I think it's a tulip, I'm not sure, or a lotus, or something. Yeah, so I've just got to look at this shape and look at what's happening with the actual shapes. I can either, well, I'm probably going to do this with a transparency map, seeing as I've got a transparency map in there. But I'm going to look at this shape. So it's almost like a little bit of a cup or a bowl. So that's cool. Just keep it on my left monitor so I can see what I'm doing. start off with a plane, as per usual. Not worry about adding any texture to it just yet. I just want to get in there, add a couple of divisions, maybe 2 there, maybe 3 there, because that'll give me enough information just to see something a little bit like this. Now what's happening, just as a technical thing, in the corners here, now that I've done that, this is what you might have heard me say this before, call them false edges. There is no edge across there, but Maya is developing an edge there, because it doesn't know how to use that edge. So it's having to kind of like make its own kind of shape up. So with anything like that, and you'll know when you're doing it, because essentially what you're doing is taking 2 opposite corners of a polygon and moving up and down. You see you get that false edge appearing. And you take this into Unreal. Unreal might see it differently. Then your false edge is produced a different way, or it just might just not do it. So instead, I'm just going to put an edge. I want this to be going in like this. So I'm going to make sure there's an edge there to actually create that. Like that. Then when I apply the existing flower 1, get the UVs, swap a bit of an unfold on it, down, look at that and think, right, is that the right kind of shape? I think so. I'm still able to kind of manipulate some bits of it. As long as I don't kind of completely destroy the UVs, I can still, or overstretch stuff I should say, I can still go in there and shape it around a little bit. Cool. So, this, you can just start to create that. How many? It's almost like a 4 or 5. At the very bottom. And I'm making sure I put the pivot point at the very bottom of the object as well, so I can pivot for, or if I need to do any like rotation after the fact, I can do that from the base. Okay, I'm just going to grab all these, duplicate them, start rotating them again. I'm switching my different things, by the way, doing that by holding the thing it's related to. So in this case, if I want to change my world from moving in the world to moving to the object orientation, I hold W, hold left click, I can switch to object. So now I can move things in each object kind of like individual relative direction. E does the same, R does the same. Because there's points where I just want to move the entire thing in a world. But then with that one, the rotation, I kind of wanted to rotate all the objects in their own relative direction. Rather than if I did that in world, it'd just do the old thing as like a big block. Change this, so I'm just for now, so I can get rid of that shitting bug. There you go. A little more of this. And again, every time you do this, you can go in there and move individual UVs or vertexes. with something like that. Let me just save one of these off as a, got to do a hero piece. There we go. So now we've got a cool bit. I might actually make another one where I just bring it down like that. Yeah. Let's grab that, combine that into one. Got the pivot point where I want to snap to the thing. And there you go. Oh, something's gone weird there. There we go. Boom, we have a little flower. So it looks okay. Wait a minute. It's alright. But I'm gonna do something radical. Maybe I've made a decision and maybe I've made a massive mistake. I'm looking at this and think, shit, there's like 4 different variations of colour in there. There's green, there's a whitey pink, there's pink, and then there's quite strong pink in the middle. And I've not thought about that with my UVs. Oh no. What am I to do? It's fine. Because this is so simple to use, so simple to do, what I'm going to do is scale some stuff down. Duplicate off my 4 variations. And then adjust the UVs accordingly. Because all I've got to do now is just move UVs and scale them down a little bit. That's all I've got to do. Demystifying, de-scarifying the world of UVs. Because again, we're dealing with single flat planes, so a lot of this information can be easily moved around. And before I even update the UVs, the texture on this, I'm actually going to do some colour. Let's actually apply some colour to this. Do our old friend, the clipping mask, and I'm going to copy you in here. Do a little bit of cheating. Filter. I'm just going to use. Oh, not that. There we go. I want to use a cutout filter to flatten off the colours. Now, Brody will probably have my face doing this, or me showing you this, but it's fine. And the colours are a bit murky, but it's fine, because again I can go in there and change the colours of these later on. There's that one there, I'm going to change that to that. Here we go. And in this case I'm not actually using that centre there, but I can use that for another thing. Same colour. Unclip the clipping mask, so release that, and then this is going to be my texture map. Because remember, it's the alpha map, the black and white map, which is creating the actual shape. If I leave this on, what very well might happen is around the edges I'm going to get black lines appearing because there's a black edge to all these textures. But if there is no, if I'm not using, if these aren't clipping masked, there is no black edge to these anymore. And the shape's just being the shape's just being controlled by the alpha map. Yep. I'm going to call this color. Jump into here. Let's clear the history while I've been doing stuff, and then preset estimations. Yep. And let's just apply those materials. Why are you over there? There you go. So I'm applying a color, so I'm going to put in the color channel. It's a file I've just made. navigate to the images folder. Back up. Oh, there we go. So, oh, it looks a bit shit. That's fine. So I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, right, let's go from the very bottom ones. Let's grab the very bottom petals. And let's move those into the correct area. So, this is why I have depth peeling turned off. I don't really use it because this is the kind of problems that you get with it. There we go. Let me just apply that new. Save out that new transparency map. Actually, forgot to do that. That's not going to help. There we go. Place that back into my. Click the sample. Hey, update. Cool. Now the next ones, they're going to be the kind of pale pink ones. So let's grab them. Now what this depth peeling is going to be doing is stopping me from actually seeing what I've got selected, so I've just got to be a bit aware of where things are going to go. Darker ones. And these are the bright ones. Okay, cool. So I've started to get my divisions in there. The colours are looking alright. I know what bits are going where. Obviously the colours are all jacked up. There's not a lot of detail in the actual textures themselves. But I've got the position of everything in there. Simple. Now, admittedly, if you're thinking ahead a bit more, I was just showing you that to the intent I did that there, to show you that if you do mess up with something like this, it's not, you know, you can easily fix it. But really, we should be thinking way ahead, going right. Okay, what are the colours going to be? How many petal variations I'm going to have? You need to be thinking about that kind of stuff. And I might have a few separate texture sheets for the flowers. Might have a few of them. Because then if I take something like this, obviously, see here the UVs are completely jacked up. Like that. But I can, this is a fairly simple flat shape, I could just automatic project this, boom, done. And then that can be scaled, moved to whatever it relates to. This again, done a bit of blue petering. So this is like this could be my flower variation too. There's a few flower heads there, but these are like maybe my small flowers, maybe big flowers. I don't know. So yeah, these two. Use my flower bits. I can assign favorite Lambert. No, not color. Transparency, please. Same procedure. go for that one. I like that one here. So put that in the center. Yeah. And this one, that simple one, I can just grab this and go, right, you're gonna be this one. And then I can do the color updates and all that kind of jobs with that. So, as you can see, there's not a massive step from doing the grasses and stuff to doing this. It's still the same idea. The 3D geometry that we want to use, it's just basic stuff. Like with the grasses, with the big thick grasses, just really basic geometry. All we need is a few subdivisions going down, so that if I want to start, because obviously a flower doesn't stick up like this. You know, I'd have a little bendy farmer friend in there. Oh, that kind of stood off to one side. Nice. The petals are just like the grasses. You just have to think a little bit more. Got to think forward a little bit more with any sort of like with this one we're looking at. There's some green. There's different variations of colour in this. But again, you're looking at something that the players are going to be looking at, like from up here, you know, or especially if it's like a third-person game, you're quite far away. You're never really going to look underneath. Now, when it gets a little bit tougher, is if you're doing anything like a succulent. So we all know what a succulent plant is, don't we? Yeah. It's the weird plant thing. So if we're doing anything like that, we've just got to think again, just think a little bit more geometric about it. But with them, it's all about how dense they are. So if I start with something similar to the grasses, something like that. Making my pivot points at the bottom. And again, I'd UV this, well, let's do what I'm actually saying. Let's UV this. Let's cut down the spine of it, right there. And so these two pieces together. There we go. So I'll have UV first, because everything else will then be carrying, every duplicate that will be carrying that UV. Two divisions, bit of a bend. That. Then it's all about the shape. Now I've got a trick for doing this kind of stuff. I've got a pivot point in, there's a grid. There's a grid, there we go. So if I move over to the grid, holding X to snap to grid, obviously. Now if I want something like a succulent, they're not just like as a flower, they're really, really close together, but with a succulent, they're like the bottom petals are quite far apart from each other, and then they get closer and closer, like a pineapple head kind of thing. So I'm going to put this bottom row quite far ahead like this. I'm just going to move the pivot point to the middle, like that. And then instead of pressing Control D, I'm going to press Shift D. This is duplicate special. Because if I do that, I press Shift D, and then I rotate it. I'm going to do it like that. And then I press Shift D again. Shift D again. Magic. And I can find another one. So grab this. Normal duplicate this one, but then put it into the next position, the next row. Move the pivot point to the center, Shift D, oops, no. If I'm going to grab each row, and I'm going to just combine them together as well. If I need to rotate anything, I can rotate a big row at a time. This one. Oh, first duplicate one off. There we go. There's going to be less and less as you get to the top as well, I believe. Super quick to make these relatively complex forms. And that's one. And I could get a couple of randos and just put them in the middle. Just to kind of fill in and block that shape in the middle, like that. So from there, I've got all that lovely variation done. Oops. And then just like with the grasses, I can have a texture sheet with a few variations. Because maybe, yeah, like this one, maybe the paler at the bottom and the more greener or bluer at the top. So I can have my different areas, different like grid sections. Maybe if it's 4 color variations, I'll literally just inside here have like do the top left quarter as the original variation, then just copy everything off to each other quarter, and then change the hue and saturation to, you know, pale it off or green it or add a bit of color or whatever, you know, whatever color thing you are doing. Okay. And obviously, because it's not a mechanical object, soften them. There we go. Because then you've got that other thing. One thing I was saying before as well, I should just rotate these. And also, just check for any overlapping for stuff like this. Any overlapping, just make sure we're either, you know, knocking stuff, you know, just doing a little bit of tidying up. So let's not get any overlapping. Let's go for it. So it might take a little bit. And also try and fill in all these holes that will be left behind and stuff. But this is all about just moving this geometry around. But that Shift D is really, really useful because it can be used for tons of different things. Like this. Like I could like ever expanding things. I just have to rotate stuff. So very, very fun. That's Shift D. So kind of like that will start, when you press Shift D, it'll start to record any interactions you have with the geometry in regards to translate, scale, and rotate. So as you start to translate, rotate, every time you press Shift D, it'll do that again. So that's how you can make these really good, nice, dense flowers super fast. Especially like some flowers are oddly geometric. You know, you can almost like, well, if yes, you might have some plants that have like, you know, 12 petals going around in a really, really kind of geometric pattern. Like it's very, very simple. Cool. So that's the plant side of things. Again, use your imagination. Look what other people are doing. Work simple. With plants, you don't need to put loads and loads of details in there. You don't want to put that much in because, again, we're going to be populating a massive valley with this. Or you could be populating a massive valley with this. So, yeah, you don't want to be putting everything you put into the scene is like 1,000,000 polygons per plant. You don't want to have that. The last thing is trees. And again, I blue peated this a little bit. I made a little toy box. So start off with the left here. We turn the wireframe on, we can see very clearly that these are completely shit. They're very, very simple. I've got my main trunk. I might even make a couple of trunks. If I'm doing this for like, for a lot of variations of the same tree, like ash or something like that, or oak, I might make a few different tree trunks, 3 different centers. And then I'll have like tens and tens and tens, maybe like 20 or 50 different branches to choose from. But the shapes are very, very simple. I'm not going super crazy with the shapes. So I've got my main trunk and I've got 2 bough variations here. This one's not quite as useful, this one's quite useful. And then I've got smaller branch variations here. So obviously I start off with that, and then all I do, and this is what we actually do, is I just start smashing into each other. I smash the skeleton of the tree first. Smash them in. Because what I'm doing here is I'm just making sure that I'm able to hide edges. Oh yeah, I would have UV'd all these ahead of time as well. So all this would have been UV'd well ahead of time. I don't build the tree until I've UV'd everything. But all I'm doing here is just smashing stuff in, making sure that I've not got any edges kind of exposed. I'm just like building up my tree, making sure that it looks interesting, it looks believable. Because what we're building first is essentially a leafless tree. And then I've got my little leaf canopy sections. Again, I've not got any textures for them just yet. But again, I would have UV'd these into some sort of grid. So I've got a couple of big hanging canopy sections, and then I've got 3 smaller sections, which are all duplicated off each other. Like I made this bottom left one first, and then I just scaled them down to make the smaller ones. So like the smallest one might be 1 or 2 leaves, or maybe a single leaf. And these 2 on the side, I literally just duplicated this and added an edge around them. So instead of having just like a straight slope like that, I can have more of a softer kind of droop. And that's all I've made. And I've made them a little bit wonky. Again, because this is nature, there's no like straight lines in nature. And then with these, again, I'm kind of thinking about what I did with the leaf. I'm putting a pivot point somewhere. I can just grab these and be like, right, okay. Start putting these in places. This can be a little bit difficult to do, to get this looking right. This can be a little bit tricky. When we do the texture for these, what we need to be thinking about is all the branches are going to appear from the bottom, or whatever the bottom would be of this, and branching through. So you're not just going to have like a random cluster of branches in the middle. You're going to have a beginning, and they're going to go out. So that's why I put the pivot point there. So I'm always able to be like, okay, that's where the branches are going to come from off the tree. So start going through and thinking, right, okay, where are these going to be coming from? How are these going to be hanging? If you've already got the textures made for these, cool, that might actually give you a better idea. It probably will help you a little bit if you've got at least the alphas in there for this. So you can be like, okay, right, I can see how some of this is going to be laid in, but you can do some simple little clusters like that for the big ones. And then some of the smaller ones might be on the ends of the smaller branches. Okay, you just grab you. And then I could have like the single leaf ones just jumping off the entire cluster. And I'm seeing it in my mind's eye here. I'm seeing a pattern of branches and leaves, which is obviously, obviously that I've developed over the years of doing this. I can kind of see past just planes and kind of see the pattern in my head. Remember though, this is going to be on our 4 foot by 4 foot square. So while I'm doing this, I'm also thinking about how big is this leaf going to be. I'm not doing a massive leaf in the middle of the forest, or a massive tree in the middle of the forest. This is going to be a small tree. So this is going to be a standard leaf size. Not that big maybe. But obviously, relative to the rest of the tree, they're going to be quite dense. are quite big. Because if we think back to some of those examples we were looking at before, some of those people were using like this little like dead bush, and it was made up of simple bits of geometry, but then some of the more thinner strands of branches were just alpha maps. So you could even do something like that if you want to do something where you're using like much more of a I don't know, it's not the opposite of deciduous. Deciduous mean like an evergreen tree. Like something that's got a lot more kind of, I don't know, a deader tree kind of aesthetic to it. That could be part of some of your alpha maps. Is you know on that sheet you could have like dead individual branches. And again, all I'm doing is just going to my toy box and thinking, right, well, I've got, oh, I like this one actually. I'm going to pick you up, bring you in. Always duplicating off. And you're going to be kind of sprouting from this because you're an interesting shape. Let's make sure you're smashed in. Like that. Now with trees, just something to think about as well is, unless like there are a few trees in the world where the trunks of them are quite bendy and crazy. Most trees will have a quite boring straight trunk, and it'll get weirder and weirder and more bendy as it gets to the edges because those end branches are thinner and they're able to kind of grow a little more like wavily, more character to them. But the dude in the middle, he's going to be quite straight. And because I've also UV'd this, if I think, because I was looking at this thinking, well, maybe it's a little bit too long. I could chop this down a little bit if I wanted to. And as long as I'm making it dense enough, I could also, you know, just kind of do that a little bit. You know, hide two pieces in each other. Those. Because I'm not. Again, just like with the leaves, I'm not super committed to the UVs. Or I'm not restricted by the UVs too much. As long as I'm not completely destroying the geometry. If I want to move the geometry a little bit, while it's even after it's been UV'd, I can do that. Because from afar, especially when it's textured and there's loads of plant life all over it, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see it. And that's trees. I mean, again, really, really simple. This is actually how we'd do it in something like SpeedTree. You'd have 20 variations of a single trunk, then you might have like 50 variations of branches, and you build a node network. Your first node would be a trunk, and then you'd have like branch network, and you have leaf network. You'd have your tree trunk, and then you'd have different points on the actual node string. You'd be like, right, I want branches from here, 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 and here, and then they start sprouting off. So your node tree would actually look like a tree. But all you're doing is basically saying, right, my first node at the very bottom is the tree trunk, and then from there, along that there's going to be vertically maybe 5 different sub-nodes where I can then spread off other branches. So then I might have like, this is my main trunk, and then I might have like boughs, so they're like a bit chunkier. So and then they go down to the branch nodes, spread off, and then on there we start spreading like leaf nodes, and then I can do this thing. SpeedTree, it was a godsend when it came out. But very, very quickly I can start making trees. You can make a few of them as well. Obviously you just got to be looking at the trees you're actually making and looking at the characteristics of how that tree hangs and how the leaves hang and how the branches are growing from it. So all together, some quite simple stuff. You know, we've learned everything in that first session. That's the base of everything. From there, it's just about extrapolating that information out into something that's a little more complex, but with the same rudimentary base. So we're still essentially making a blade of grass with this. Essentially, we're still making, like, well, the thicker blades of grass with this. We're still making the simple blades of grass with this. Again, just a little bit more information. And when if you're doing, like I said, like really complex plants, it will obviously start getting a little bit more complex, start getting a little more difficult, but break everything down to a really basic shape. If anyone's doing cactuses, or he's thinking about doing cactuses, or anything that's got spines on it, those spines can just be that. Just be that. And you have like maybe a prefab cluster of 3 that you just kind of have like this. It's like a little unit combined together. And at every point you want these little like cluster of spines, you just literally duplicate it off, drag it into place, rotate it into place, and that's it. Simple. And not at this point as well, while I'm making the flowers, making all my variations, I'm not even bending anything. I'm keeping those nice and straight, and I'll bend them when I'm actually dressing the scene, so that I know which way these can bend, how they're going to interact with each other. Very simple. Like I was saying, this is a simple brief. Questions of any of that, if there are any?
I think I missed it. On the pink flower, the transparency is like off on the petals.
It's just my acting weird.
Right. Did you do a way of editing it, or do you just leave it that way?
Yeah, there are. It causes more issues than it fixes. If I go to renderer and then go to the option box with viewport 2, change the transparency algorithm to depth peeling, fixes it. But then we can't see what we're selecting because face mode doesn't work anymore. Well, no, face mode works, but it covers stuff up, which is well annoying. It's just something we've kind of got to work. Jumping back and forth from this is fine, but it's horrible. Something that does help though is I put two-sided liner. I think I said this on Monday. I'm a bit disappointed in myself. I only found out about this on Monday. We had to do this we had to make a shader, make a material with a two-sided capacity to it back in the day. And I completely just vexed on not looking for this anymore. And yeah, I found this on Monday. I was like, holy shit. So what that will do is obviously, oh, it's black. Oh, I can't see anything. Oh no. No, you see. But you're still going to have that issue happening. So sometimes just turn the textures off. Worked great for a while. So I can see that. No transparency issues there. It's only when transparency gets turned on. But then it doesn't even happen in rendering. It's just about this back face plane thing. I'm going to do a little bit, because again, now that I found out about that on Monday, I'm going to do a little bit of investigating today to see if there's something inside my to stop that. Because it seems like an old thing that's been around for years. It's just never fixed, and I can't accept that they've not fixed it. Yeah, this transparency thing's been a bugger for 15 years. But yeah, that's the organics. That's everything. It's a really simple kind of like framework we have to work to. The whole thing, the difficulty of this is just making sure things look realistic. Oh, they look believable, not necessarily realistic, believable. You know, when people do the grasses as well, don't make your grasses bend off to the side in the alpha. Keep them relatively, you can make them a little bit wobbly, but keep them relatively straight, because we can bend them ourselves. And it means that you can probably pack more into the alpha as well. If things are like straighter like that, obviously you can stack tons in. But if you've got one that's kind of like off to one side like that, it's taking up a bunch of space, and it might even waste a bit of space above it. So, and yeah, just colours. Think about your colours. Work into a colour scheme. Work into a colour palette is really useful for this. And that's why I was saying about thinking about your biomes. If you're working to some sort of swamp biome, there's going to be a colour palette you can use for a swamp biome, desert biome, color palette there. A Zen Garden, there's going to be like a Zen Garden color palette, that kind of thing. Because then you're restricted, and restrictions are good. Restrictions are very, very good for this kind of stuff, because what you don't want to do is have the freedom of using the entire rainbow and just have something which is horrendous to look at, because there's too many things coming at you. Did I talk about chroma on Monday? Chroma. Again, it's important for this kind of stuff. Chroma, Brody might call it something different. But if we look at this here, everything to the upper right of the colour palette, up here, that's massive chroma, that's an intense chroma. Because I'm all the way up, I'm at the highest saturation of that colour, high chroma. If I start coming over to the left, especially coming down to the left, I get lower chroma. If you have a load of things that are high chroma next to each other, it's very hard to look at. It's like having like royal purple and orange next to each other. They work well with each other sometimes, but it's quite a lime green and orange. That's a perfect example. Lime green and orange, horrendous to look at because they're two very, very competing colours. In nature, what are your colours anyway? You got everything from your main colours, from like bluey greens to yellowy greens. That's like your bedrock, and then from there you start pushing it up a little bit. But the highest chroma I'd only ever used for the details of the details kind of thing. Keep everything mid chroma, basically the middle of the colour box for most of your stuff, and then choose maybe like 2 or 3 or 4 higher chroma dominant colours. Like a limited colour palette. I always tell students maybe have like, if you're doing like a 5 colour palette, do 3 sub-colours and 2 dominant colours. So your 3 mid-low chroma colours are going to be the most things. You can shift you can shift hue and saturation a tiny bit on them, and then you might have 2. But if you're doing something like 7, then you could have like 4 non-competing similar mid-low chroma colours, and then like 3 high chroma colours. Because then with flowers, especially like even in Britain, we've got like some like very, very deep purple flowers, and we've got some very, very obviously daffodils and buttercups and that. Like buttercups are super, super yellow, sometimes are white. That kind of thing. Just think about the colours you want to jump out. So again, cactus, you got green, but then sometimes you got like red cactus flowers on them. That'd be nice to kind of jump out. Just think about them chroma, think about them colours. So, any other questions? New?
How do you snap the point to the bottom of like a grass or
So, if my pivot point is one where I don't want it, just D and X. Well done. D will release the pivot point, and then either V to snap to vertex, and I'll drag it to the vertex I want to snap to, or I will just, if I just want to drag it downwards, it's only going to move downwards. It's not going to move anywhere else, or side with the arrows. If I want to snap it to the grid, D and X, because X is the grid snap, and then that's snapping to the grid. But yes, D and either V or D and X. And I even tell you down there at the bottom, if I hold D, use manipulator to select the component to change the pivot position, axis orientation, D or insert to return to move mode. Yeah, that's what they're at the bottom. But yeah, D and whatever. Cool. Alright then, start recording.